There are 13 constellations on the path that the sun travels across the sky. You were taught 12. Every horoscope you've ever read is based on 12. Every zodiac chart, every birth chart, every astrology column in every newspaper and app and website on Earth divides the sky into 12 equal sections and assigns each one a name, a symbol, a set of dates. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, 12 signs, 12 months, 12 neat slices of a circle. But the sun doesn't travel through 12 constellations. It travels through 13, and the 13th one, the one sitting right there on the sun's path between Scorpio and Sagittarius, visible in the night sky, documented by astronomers for over 2,000 years, wasn't lost. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't discovered recently and then suppressed. It was known from the beginning. It was deliberately removed to make the mathematics work. And the mythology of what that constellation represents, what it symbolizes, what story the ancient world attached to it, is so precisely aligned with the act of removing it that it reads less like coincidence and more like a confession. The constellation is called Ophiuchus, the Serpent Bearer. And the story of why it was erased is the story of what happens when a system of knowledge is trimmed to fit a system of counting. The deeper I went into who removed it and what they were protecting, the more I found something hiding in plain sight, not in the stars, in the myth. Start with the astronomy, because the astronomy is not in dispute. The ecliptic is the apparent path the sun traces across the sky over the course of a year as observed from Earth. It is a line, a band, a ribbon of sky roughly 8 degrees wide through which the sun, the moon, and the planets appear to move. Along this ribbon, there are constellations, groups of stars that humans have been naming and mapping for millennia. The ones that fall on the ecliptic are the constellations of the zodiac, a word derived from the Greek zodiakos kyklos, meaning circle of animals. There are 13 constellations on this circle, not 12, 13. The sun passes through the boundaries of Ophiuchus for approximately 18 days each year, from roughly November 29th to December 17th. During those 18 days, the sun is not in Scorpio. It is not in Sagittarius. It is in Ophiuchus. This is measurable. It is observable. It is confirmed by every astronomical instrument and database in existence. NASA, the International Astronomical Union, and every observatory on Earth acknowledge that Ophiuchus is on the ecliptic. The sun passes through it. The constellation is there. And yet, on every zodiac chart, in every horoscope, in every astrological system practiced by every astrologer in the Western world, Ophiuchus does not exist. The 18 days during which the sun passes through it are assigned to Sagittarius. The constellation is on the path. The system pretends it isn't. This raises a simple but critical question. Who removed it and why? The answer goes back 3,000 years. To Babylon. Around the 5th century BC, Babylonian astronomers formalized the zodiac system. They had been observing the sky for centuries. They had cataloged the constellations on the ecliptic. They knew, precisely and documentably, that 13 constellations fell on the sun's path. This is not speculation. Babylonian clay tablets, the Emuel-Apin series, dated to approximately 1000 BC, catalog the constellations of the ecliptic, and Ophiuchus is among them. The Babylonians knew it was there. And then they removed it. The reason was mathematical. The Babylonians had a 12-month calendar based on lunar cycles. 12 months. 360 degrees in a circle. A number the Babylonians invented, divisible by 12, giving each month a clean 30-degree arc of the sky. 12 signs, 12 months, 30 degrees each. The system was elegant, symmetrical, beautiful. 13 is not divisible into 360. 13 signs would give each constellation approximately 27.7 degrees of the ecliptic, a number that doesn't round, doesn't tile, doesn't fit into any calendar system the Babylonians used. 13 was messy. 13 broke the grid. So the Babylonians looked at their 13 constellations and chose the one they could afford to lose. They chose the Serpent Bearer. As if they were following instructions they didn't fully understand. Now here's where the story turns. Because the constellation they removed wasn't arbitrary. It wasn't the smallest constellation on the ecliptic. That would be Scorpio, which the sun passes through for only 6 or 7 days. Ophiuchus occupies 18 days of the sun's path, nearly 3 times as many as Scorpio. If the Babylonians had been choosing which constellation to remove based purely on size, Scorpio would have been the logical candidate. They didn't remove Scorpio. They removed the one that was 3 times larger, and the mythology attached to the one they removed is where the coincidence stops feeling like coincidence. In Greek mythology, Ophiuchus represents Asclepius, the god of medicine, the healer, the figure who learned the secret of bringing the dead back to life. The story goes like this. Asclepius was the son of Apollo, the god of light and knowledge. He was taught the art of healing by the centaur Chiron, the wisest of all beings. Asclepius became so skilled in medicine that he could cure any disease, he could heal any wound, and then he crossed a line. He learned how to resurrect the dead. He brought a mortal back from the underworld. He broke the boundary between life and death. And Zeus, the king of the gods, the ruler of the cosmic order, struck him down with a thunderbolt. Not because Asclepius had failed, because he had succeeded. Because a healer who can reverse death threatens the entire structure of the universe. The gods rule because mortals die. If mortals stop dying, the gods lose their authority. Asclepius was killed not for ignorance, but for knowledge, for knowing too much, for learning the one thing the system could not allow to be known. And then he was placed in the sky, as a constellation, as a reminder. Ophiuchus, the Serpent Bearer, holding the snake that symbolizes both healing and forbidden knowledge, fixed in the stars between Scorpio and Sagittarius, visible every night to anyone who looks up. And then he was removed from the zodiac. The healer who was killed for knowing too much was deleted from the system of knowing that maps the sky to human life. The silence was deafening. I want to pause here and ask something that isn't usually asked. What kind of system removes the healer? Because the zodiac isn't just a list of constellations. It's a symbolic framework. Each sign carries meaning, archetype, energy. Scorpio carries transformation and death. Sagittarius carries philosophy and expansion. And between them, in the space the system pretends is empty, sits the figure who could reverse death. The healer, the one who crosses boundaries, the one who was punished for learning the secret the system exists to protect. The mythology reads like a blueprint for the deletion. The constellation was removed because it represented exactly the kind of knowledge that systems of order cannot tolerate. Knowledge that crosses boundaries. Knowledge that reverses what is supposed to be permanent. Knowledge that gives ordinary beings access to powers reserved for those who rule. Zeus killed Asclepius for the same reason the Babylonians removed Ophiuchus. The system required 12. 13 was disorder, and the 13th sign carried a meaning that the system could not absorb without breaking. Now follow the thread forward. Because the deletion wasn't a one-time event, it was maintained for 3,000 years. The Greeks inherited the Babylonian zodiac and kept 12 signs. The Romans adopted it and kept 12. The medieval astrologers preserved it and kept 12. The Renaissance astronomers formalized it and kept 12. And in the modern era, every attempt to reintroduce Ophiuchus has been met with the same institutional response: dismissal. Not refutation, dismissal. In 2016, NASA published an educational article pointing out the simple astronomical fact that the sun passes through 13 constellations, not 12, and that the Babylonians had known this and chosen to exclude Ophiuchus. The internet erupted. Headlines screamed that NASA had changed the zodiac. Astrologers pushed back. NASA was forced to clarify that they hadn't changed anything, that they were simply describing the sky as it actually is. The clarification was necessary because the mere act of naming the 13th constellation felt, to millions of people, like an attack on the system they had built their identity around. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. The constellation has been there for 3,000 years. The astronomical fact has never been in dispute. And every time someone points to the sky and says there are 13, the system responds by saying there are 12. Not because the sky has changed, because the system cannot absorb 13. The evidence suggests something much larger than a mathematical convenience, because here's what the maintenance of 12 actually requires. It requires ignoring precession. The Earth's axis wobbles on a cycle of approximately 26,000 years, a phenomenon called axial precession, which slowly shifts the position of the constellations relative to the calendar. When the Babylonians assigned Aries to the spring equinox 3,000 years ago, the sun was indeed in Aries at the equinox. It no longer is. Due to precession, the sun is now in Pisces at the spring equinox. Every sign has shifted by approximately one position. Your zodiac sign, the one you've identified with your entire life, the one you read horoscopes for, the one tattooed on some people's bodies, is based on where the constellations were 3,000 years ago, not where they are now. The system doesn't just exclude one constellation, it excludes the movement of the sky itself. It freezes the heavens at a moment chosen by Babylonian administrators and refuses to acknowledge that the sky has moved since then. The zodiac is not a map of the current sky. It is a map of the Babylonian sky, preserved in amber, maintained by tradition, and defended against every astronomical fact that has accumulated in the 3,000 years since it was drawn. The deeper I went, the more I found that the deletion of Ophiuchus is not an isolated act. It is the foundational act, the moment when observation was subordinated to system, when the sky was trimmed to fit the calendar instead of the calendar being built to match the sky, when 13 became 12 because 12 was tidier. And once that first deletion was made, once the principle was established that the system mattered more than the observation, every subsequent inaccuracy followed naturally. The precession was ignored because acknowledging it would require adjusting the system. Ophiuchus was maintained in exile because including it would require rebuilding the system. The system became more important than the sky it was supposed to describe. This raises a simple but critical question. What does it mean that every person on Earth who reads a horoscope is reading a description of a sky that hasn't existed for 3,000 years? Not wrong by a little. Wrong by an entire sign. Wrong by a full constellation. The person who thinks they're a Sagittarius might be, astronomically, an Ophiuchus. The person who identifies as a Scorpio might actually have been born when the sun was in Libra. The entire framework, the signs, the dates, the personality descriptions, the compatibility charts, all of it is calibrated to a sky that existed when Babylon was the center of the world, and that has been slowly, silently, constantly shifting away from those calibrations ever since. And nobody updates it, because updating it would mean admitting it was wrong. And admitting it was wrong would mean admitting that the system is not a map of the sky, but a monument to the moment when someone decided the sky needed to be simpler than it actually is. I don't have a complete theory. I have a question that multiplies the deeper I look. Why was a constellation that the Babylonians knew was on the ecliptic deliberately excluded from the zodiac 3,000 years ago? Why was the healer, the figure who crossed the boundary between life and death, the one who was punished for knowing too much, the specific archetype chosen for deletion? Why has the deletion been maintained for 30 centuries despite the astronomical evidence being freely available? Why does every modern attempt to acknowledge the 13th constellation provoke institutional resistance? Why does the zodiac system refuse to acknowledge that the sky has moved since the system was drawn? And the question underneath all the others, the one that sits in the 18 days between November 29th and December 17th, when the sun is passing through a constellation that the system says isn't there. What was Ophiuchus carrying? What knowledge was the Serpent Bearer holding that the system couldn't afford to include? What did the healer know that got him struck from the sky by the same gods who put him there? I'll leave you with this. Tonight, if the sky is clear, look south. Find Scorpio. Find Sagittarius. Now look at the space between them. There is a constellation there, a large one, a figure holding a serpent, a healer placed in the stars by the same gods who killed him for learning too much. He has been there for as long as humans have looked up. He was on the Babylonian tablets. He is in the Greek myths. He is on the ecliptic. The sun passes through him for 18 days every year. And for 3,000 years, the system that maps the sky to human life has looked at that constellation and said, "You are not there. The healer is still in the sky. The serpent is still in his hands. The knowledge he carried is still written in the stars, in the space between Scorpio and Sagittarius. In the 18 days the zodiac pretends don't exist. They removed him to make 12. They killed him to preserve order, and the sky has been 13 ever since."